We're going to be talking about everything and anything to do with Delta 8. Alrighty, Parliament, what's up? Here we go, episode 11 of Owls TV, where we bring you along the journey with us as we get our products out to the world. So today, I want to make sure that all of you are liking and subscribing. You know, do it down there for the subscription, a little bit over here for the likes. Helps out the channel, gives us a little bit more publicity. So please make sure to do that. Today we're going to be talking about everything and anything to do with Delta 8. We're going to be talking about the testing. We're going to be talking about how to know quality. We're going to be talking about the unknowns in Delta 8, which I know a lot of you are asking about, and there's a lot of questions on the internet about what is the unknowns in the testing. And then we just want to give you a little bit of an update on what's going on in Owls, where we at. And so with that, we'll get right to it. So first of all, here's some of our carts. We've been toying with, how do we want we've got different logos here, different logos here. And so we've just been trying to figure out what is the best type of battery that we want. And the one thing I wanted to talk to you about just starting off is how do we know what a good quality cart is like? Well, firstly, you got to look at the oil. And the first thing you'll notice is that Delta 8 is really hard. I mean, rock solid. So it shouldn't be moving at all. And I'll show you a little test with this where right here, I'm not sure if you're able to see it, but the bubbles here are pretty clear right now, and you can see they're at the top. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put these in my pocket. We're going to turn them upside down, and then at the end of this we'll see how much they've moved, if at all. So into the pocket they go. And so basically, with regards to Delta 8, as I just shared, how do you know what's good Delta 8? How do you know what's bad Delta 8? First things first is just looking at it in general. We are talking about something that is really clear. We're talking about crystal clear for a 90%, 95, 98% oil. You'll see that it's crystal clear. Lower potencies can sometimes have a little bit of a rose hue, and then as you get lower down, you'll see that the color will change, sometimes to be a little bit more golden. And it's hard. This stuff does not move. If you have oil that's moving, I would be questioning it thoroughly. The next thing is testing. Now, in the United States, there's so many different testing procedures in different states. And the first thing I'll say is you should always want to see a full panel test with Delta 8 products. Now, what does that mean? First of all, we have our cannabinoid test. So the cannabinoid test is going to tell you, hey, this has 70% Delta 8, it's got 5% CBN, it's got 2% CBC, and then you've got the rest of it that you're wondering, well, what is that? And we'll get to that in a little bit. The second test after the cannabinoid test would be a pesticide. You want to make sure that your oil is clean, that there's nothing else in it, especially if you're going to be vaping it. You want to make sure that you have 0 parts per million, if anything 0 parts per billion, depending on your state, of pesticides in it. The next thing that you want to see is solvents, residual solvents. So is there any extras in there? And by that I mean it could be something as ethanol, could be butane. Sometimes these are used in the extraction process. You want to make sure that all of those are being removed. So we have, and then also the fourth, so we have the cannabinoids, we have the pesticides, we have the solvents, and then finally we would have the heavy metals. Especially if we're going to be using carts, you want to make sure, hey, is there lead in my oil? I don't want any lead in my oil, don't think you want any lead in your oil, so make sure that you have a full panel screen. If you have somebody that says, oh, we don't really do that, or they only have just a cannabinoid test, I mean, I would be questioning that thoroughly, because wouldn't you want to make sure what you're putting into your body is safe? And if I have a product or a brand that I'm selling, I will for sure let everybody know the quality of my product. So that's really everything to do with the testing. The next thing, let's talk about the unknowns. But first, as I get into the unknowns, I want to explain to you a little bit about how Delta 8 is made and where does it come from and how do we get to Delta 8. So Delta 8 is an isomer of CBD. What that basically means is that it can change from CBD into Delta 8 depending on certain catalysts or certain conditions that the oil or the isolate is put under. The same thing will actually happen with Delta 9, which is marijuana, but of course we are a hemp product. This is not marijuana. So the process, what would happen is that you would have a catalyst that is typically something that is acidic. Now you could have it be something like citric acid. You can imagine you would have your short path distillation, which basically is you have a collection pod over here that has your distillate and it has your isolate in here, and then you have a heating element around this glass mantle, and then basically the heat is then applied, and then you can imagine you have basically a glass tube that comes up, and this is called the short path. It comes over and then it recollects over here. So you have your isolate over here, it's heated with some catalysts. It could be activated carbon, it could be citric acid, it could be hydrochloric acid. So again, when you talk about some of these acids, you want to make sure that it is being cleaned up after the fact and you're not ingesting something that hasn't been properly cleaned. So again, why would you not have a full panel test to verify all of that? So that's how it's made, and it can be purified afterwards, because then you have your distillate over here, and then depending if you want to re-distill it again once it's converted to Delta 8, you can increase the potency, or depending if you have a really good conversion, you could have a 99.9% isolate and now you have a 98% isolate over here, a 98% Delta 8 distillate. And then after that process here, it will be cleaned up further, which means it will be ran through medias, it will be washed through different material, making sure that it's clean. But you want to verify that, and so make sure that you are. And so the next thing comes down to, what are some of these unknowns? Because often you'll see a test, and this is the same test that you would have for just like regular CBD oil, and sometimes with CBD oil you might see, hey, it's 70%. What's the extras? What's that other 30%? And you'll see this in just a regular concentrate, you'll see it in distillates, you'll see it in nearly everything apart from an isolate that might be like a 99.9%. But even then, there's always this question of what are some of these unknowns? So the wider the unknowns, the greater uncertainty. And I know for some people that might not be a big deal, but I think it's important that everybody can make an educated decision for what is best for them. So, for instance, there's a lot of unknown in cigarettes. People don't really care about it, but as I'm saying, it's important for you to make the decision for what's best for you, and that will be also reflected in price point. So, when we are talking about the unknowns, the real truth here is that no one actually knows, right? Now, that's due to testing. There's a lot of deeper testing that you can do that costs a lot of money, and you can imagine there's a lot of these isomers, they're unidentified compounds, or that they aren't able to be tested for. Now, some people just giving a blanket statement saying something like, hey, my oil's 60% or my oil's 70%, and I think the rest of it is just Delta 10, or it's these other cannabinoids, and that's crazy talk, because you can look at what's called a chromatograph, that will basically show you the different peaks. And when you get a test, basically you can, when you get a test done in a testing facility, they will have what's called a chromatograph that basically will identify certain peaks, which are cannabinoids. So you can imagine if you have a peak that says, hey, this is delta 8, and you have this peak, okay, cool, I can see that. And then you have, okay, there's one before that, that's delta 9, and it's a smaller peak, okay, I can see that. And then you go down the line and suddenly you see there's all these peaks, but you don't have the identification for what these peaks are. And there's a limited amount of companies that can test for delta 10 and delta 6 and all of these other deltas, but the fact of the matter is that we're certainly dealing with a lot of isomers that are unknown. And it's important for you to know that. I've personally tried plenty of oils that have been 65% and I'm fine. I actually thoroughly enjoyed them. And I think that some of these unknowns, while we can't test for them, definitely hold some benefits for us. But I do think it's important that you all ask the right questions and that you're holding everybody accountable from my company to anybody else's company. And don't just take somebody saying, oh, we just don't test for that. Demand better, demand more. And so what we've learned is, yes, absolutely, there can be some delta 10. There can be some delta 6. But there is going to be a lot of other things that we just don't know. And I want you to know that we always do our best to have as pure of a compound as possible. Our last oil was like 89.9%, but that other 10% is unknown. We do believe it to be safe, and we have personally tried it numerous times and had a very enjoyable experience. But you need to make a decision of what's best for you, and don't believe anybody when they just say, hey, we've got this oil here and this is what we think it is, because they don't know. So better to just be upfront and straight and say, we don't know, testing needs to improve, and that we are working our best to find out what they are, as opposed to just saying something like, yeah, it's just these other cannabinoids and we can't test for them, because that's just not the truth, to some extent. When we're talking about some products, let's talk about some carts. You want to make sure that your cart is tested for heavy metals. You want to make sure that that it's got the solvents, that you are making sure that your product, so you can have your original oil here, your original oil is going to show you, okay, hey, this is the potency, these are the labs for it, that's fine. And you can put something into a cartridge that over time it will it maybe pull heavy metals, especially when you add terpenes. So when you look at a cartridge, and I say cartridges specifically because there's just been so much crap in the market that you really want to make sure that the cartridges that you're using are safe. And so with regards to the cartridges, often what you'll see is that companies will just give you a potency test that will say, here is our oil, it's 90%, and here's our cartridge, it's 90%. That's a load of bullshit, because they're adding terpenes. Terpenes will reduce the potency, and if somebody has a cartridge, you want to see, well, what's the total terpenes in that cartridge? If you see a cartridge and it's just got the potency test, but you don't see any terpenes, I would question that considerably, because if you have just ask them, hey, where are your terpenes? Did you test it with your terpenes? And if they say no, then they're basically trying to say, well, hey, my cart's 90%, when in fact it's not. And 95% of people aren't going to go and get a cart tested themselves. And so it's important for you, again, to ask the right questions and know what is a good question to ask. Because if you have an oil that's, let's say, 90% and you add 10% terpenes to it, well, that oil has gone from 90% down to 82. No need to lie about it. Pretty clear, pretty straightforward. So just make sure that you're doing your due diligence. Then the next thing we want to talk about is it's just recognizing that how this oil can change over time. What you notice with Delta 8, it can be very clear at the start. You may receive oil that's super clear. You may receive a cartridge that's super clear at the start. And then by the end of it, and what we've noticed, especially to do with sunlight, you'll notice that the cart will start to change into like a golden color. You will notice that sometimes if you buy larger volumes of oil, such as ounces or half ounces or liters even, that you will see the top of the oil will have this sort of this red ring on it, and that's due to oxygen being introduced to the oil, which changes that color. So just another important thing for you to realize. And what else do we got? So let's talk about some drug testing. A lot of people ask those questions. Does Delta 8 THC make you fail a drug test? The answer is yes, everybody, it will. So please don't think that you're suddenly, you're working in your job, you're getting a drug test, you found this new answer, and you think that you can now enjoy Delta 8 and you're not going to end up failing the drug test. The main reason for that is that Delta 8 and Delta 9 will both turn into the same metabolite in your stomach. So when it's being excreted from whatever way you're being tested, it's going to look the same as it did Delta 9 anyway, which is going to make you fail the drug test. So just make sure that you are, taking the right measures and don't be putting your job in jeopardy. We are really taking our time with our products. We are very thankful for all the patience that everyone has had. The reason that is because we want to make sure that everything is correct, that the testing is correct, that all the labeling is correct, that the oil potencies are to our liking. And we've even went above and beyond where we're now using CannVerify. So CannVerify is a company that uses blockchain technology, and we'll have an extra label on all of our products that you will basically scratch off the QR code. You'll be able to scan it, and you will be able to make sure that the product that you're holding in your hand is 100% an Alice product. You're not going to be dealing with fakes, and you're going to see a lot of fakes come out. As this continues to grow and Delta 8 has exploded, I'm sure that you've seen it beginning to pop up everywhere, and you need to make sure that the product that you're holding is from the company that you think you bought it from. And so just make sure that you check your testing. And if a company has CannVerify, that's just an extra level of security for yourself. So just be safe out there, everybody. Make sure that you know what you're ingesting. Make sure that you have trusted, verified sources for your Delta 8, and make sure that the tests are correct. And don't be afraid to ask questions. So that's basically everything you need to know about Delta 8, folks. If you have any questions, please drop a comment below. As always, we are giving away our free cart every week. Instead of it being the first comment, it's going to be a random selected comment. Please do not apply to this if you're not 21. Don't take the opportunity away from somebody else and waste a bunch of time. And then finally, the last little updates for you. Website is going great. We're just taking some photos. Right now, we're waiting for the carts. The cart packaging is being labeled at the moment and should be through us by next week. And then we will have those product photos taken, and we'll have the website getting ready to be available for payment processing. And I would be saying that we're talking probably around July 10th to July 14th, we'll have a full product line. Maybe if we're lucky, we might have something by July 1. Just make sure to keep up to date on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and we'll do our best to keep you in the loop. We will never put out any products early though. We want to make sure that, unless it's for a sample for all of you, but we're not going to release a full product line without our testing, making sure that everything is done correct. So thank you, everybody. Hope you're enjoying your day. And finally, before I forget, let's have a little look here. So there you can see here, it's been upside down. It's been in my nice warm pocket. You can see on this one, it's sort of moved a little bit. On this one, it's moved a little bit more. But as you can see, it hasn't really moved that much. So that's what you know good quality oil is like. And then I'll give you a little peek here. Let me shake my. That's all I'm gonna show you. but we'll have some product photos up later on in the week. So good luck, Parliament. Have a nice day. Enjoy your week. Peace.